Hey there, this is Timor Soul, and you are watching basically Feywild, a show where I talk about everything Fey. In the last episode, I've been talking about monsters. I've been homebrewing monsters and showing you how I do it and how you can do it by yourself in your home for your own games. Unfortunately, Wizards of the Coast didn't give us much Fey to play with, so sometimes we gotta create our own. Also, in this episode, we will be probably needing some specific Fey that suit our needs, because today we are talking about Feywild games, but not only games, Feywild pranks, Feywild games, Feywild trials, and other things that the Feywild creatures do to us. Now, throughout the whole series, I've been talking a lot about how different Feywild creatures are mischievous or malevolent or benevolent, or in other way have some disposition towards us, and that disposition is enforced by some actions that the Fae take, unbeknownst to most of us and unbeknownst to most mortals. So the pranks, the tricks that they play on us, these are things that we've been hearing about throughout the whole series, and almost every time when you Google or search anything about Feywild, you will see posts and information about how the fake creatures are pranksters, how they are tricksters, how they are jesters, and how they like doing stuff that is funny and according to them, but not exactly so funny for the humans or mortals that they meet. So it's a common trope and a common topic that the Fae are pranksters. And so in this episode, we will be talking about Fae games, tricks, pranks, actual games, and trials and tests. And I've divided the Fae games into three different levels. We will talk about them and see 4 examples from each of these levels or types of games that I listed over here. Why did I list them? Because each game is somewhat different. You can, broadly speaking, you can treat everything as a game. Everything is a game. Everything that we do is a game in one way or another, and it's getting deep into philosophy. I don't want to do that. I'll just say that these levels are purely arbitrary, and they're not. They're made for me so that it is easier for me to talk about them, and they're not exactly the names of them are not exactly maybe accurate. But let's start with tricks and pranks. Tricks and pranks are things where the NPCs or the players, NPCs surrounding the players, so non-Fey NPCs, and the players, they don't know that they are taking part of them. That's the main deal with pranks, right? So you don't know that they are happening. You're getting pranked, you're getting tricked, and the deal is to make you, to see your natural reaction. Now, I've mentioned this in one of the earlier episodes. For Fae, there's a conception that for Fae, we humans and humanoids are something like animals. And I've read a very clever post a few days ago, I think on Reddit or somewhere. We are the Fae for animals. Look at this from this side. Imagine a raccoon or a wild fox or whatever else that is living somewhere near the urban, near an urban environment, near a city. The urban environment is the Feywild. The animals talking with each other talk about how you don't go there because bad things may happen, and bad things may happen. You may get ran down by a car. You may get shot. You may get kidnapped and adopted by some good folk. Many different things can happen to you if you are a fox in a city, and this is the same things that can happen to a human if it goes to the Feywild. So this is a very clever metaphor. You sometimes get food from humans, and sometimes they shoot you, and there's no exact there's no line that would say this is good and this is bad when an animal looks at a human. Humans are morally abstract for animals, probably, and this is the same way in which Archfey or Fey are abstract for humanoids. But I'm digressing, sorry for that. So we have tricks and pranks, and we know that Fey are pranking humans and humanoids, that this is something that they do, and they do it for fun, or they do it because they can, because why not? And I got 4 examples of tricks or pranks that can be used in your games. Now, I am going to talk a little bit about the levels of these pranks and tricks and other games, although all of these can be multi-level. So if you have a high-level party, it doesn't mean that you cannot have a simple prank or trick played on them. That's not out of the question. So the first thing that I got over here is swap the child. This is probably the most known myth or legend that is surrounding the Fey creatures. The legend that Fey kidnap children, especially infants, but also small children, and they swap the child for something else. In some stories, the Fae swap the child for valuables like a satchel of gold or gems or other things that would be considered valuable by humanoids. And in other stories, they are swapped for a bundle of sticks or a pile of rocks or something absolutely not worth it. And again, going back to earlier episodes, in one of the episodes, I was talking about Fey morality and how it's not all gray like our morality, but the Fae understand things in a very abstract manner. So for them, immortal beings, kidnapping a child is not considered a crime at all, especially if a barter is in place. So if they took something, they left something in exchange, and there shouldn't be any problem with that because that's equal exchange. So why not? The origin of the changeling myth or legend probably is, as usually it is, medical. So if a child is born with some disability, especially a visual disability, then nowadays we know that this is a sickness, this is a disability, that this is this and that syndrome or whatever else. Back in the days where people talked about Fae as if they are real creatures, these were signs that the child was swapped for a changeling. So for a creature that is not human, it is more it is usually an immortal being that is the offspring of Fey creatures. So the Fey did kidnap the child and it swapped it, but not for a gold satchel, but for an infant of the Fey, which is in a way different. For our games and our purposes, the difference could be, for example, pointy ears or eyes that have an unusual color, or a goat beard for an infant, or hoofs instead of legs, and so on. In reality, these were minor disabilities, probably were minor medical disabilities. Okay, so this is one prank, and you can easily use this prank for your games in a setting for your game, where the players need to find the real child, or need to find the kidnapper, need to find who stole the child from a farmer on a farm that they actually are in this moment. Animate object. And this is a fun hook or prank that you can play also on your players, disregarding if they are in an urban or rural environment. Imagine invisible creatures casting animate object around the players all day long. The players will probably think that these are ghosts or these are specters, right, or whatever else. They will search for unnatural sources of these objects being animated and moving around. They might search for hidden symbols or signals that the objects or ghosts are trying to convey. This can lead to a whole slew of shenanigans, which can be really fun for your group. And I think this is something that is very universal also, because it's very light-footed, sorry, but in the same moment you can actually use this as a plot hook that pushes the players towards one direction or another through symbols that are meaningless, in fact, but the players don't know that. Find the source. This is a similar thing as with animate object. So you have invisible creatures that do something. In this case, we're not talking about physical manipulation of the world. We're talking about manipulating the world with images, sounds, and sensations. So you can imagine Fae casting major image or minor image, disguise self also, why not, and other magic, illusory magic, that creates an illusion of something going on in a specific place. So for example, a Fae might cast major image and or hallucinatory terrain and major image, and you can have a mountain with a dragon on top of it, and this is the illusion that has to be broken in some way. This is again a fun way in which your players might get all riled up because they have to fight a dragon or whatever else other terrifying creature. And the fact is that it's only an illusion. There's a bunch of pixies sitting behind a rock and jiggling all the way, all the travel that the players have to take towards the mountain where the presumed dragon is. And you also can swap or switch this this prank or trick and make the fairies try to lure the heroes to, for example, a forgotten or abandoned griffin nest to help the griffin, or with, let's say there are small baby griffins that and their mother was hunted down, and the pixies try to help, and they do whatever they can with major images and illusions to lure the players because of their good heart. Why not? If we are going with this this idea that all Fae are wild and nature connected, then this is also a plausible or acceptable option. And the last thing I got over here in the Tricks and Pranks series is the Tell the Truth. And again, we have invisible casters. All these tricks and pranks are made from hiding, and they are made from a stealthy perspective. As mentioned, this is the core thing about pranks. You don't get to see who pranks you, and the pranker gets, the trickster gets to see your reaction. So again, an invisible caster that casts Zone of Truth, or perpetually casts Zone of Truth. There may be a group of tricksters, and they cast it in a specific place, for example, in the marketplace, where people are supposed to be haggling, bartering, and so on. And all of a sudden, a marketplace goes nearly extinct of vendors because no vendor wants to have their stall over there because business is simply not going well over there. And again, maybe this is a way in which the pixies, fairies, or whatever else want to bring the attention of someone or something bigger to a specific place. Maybe they are trying to find out who is responsible for cutting out the forest that is nearby. Maybe they are afraid that more vendors will come, and if more vendors will come, then something bad will happen with their natural habitat. So this is something that is between exploratory and social when it comes to encounters, and again, it can be used in the various degrees of various different scenarios. Now, unfortunately, when it comes to different creatures that we can use for these pranks, we're very restricted or limited to what we got. If we pick Fae and see what we got over here, these pranks should be played by spellcasters, and on the other hand, these spellcasters can't be super high level spellcasters, because if they would be, it would probably not be so plausible, or the story, the tricking in such a naive way would probably not exactly make sense. So we got the pixies, and the pixies are pretty decent. They have phantasmal force, and they have polymorph, and they have sleep. So if we would be willing to swap some of these spells that the pixies have, so for example, polymorph is a 4th level spell, and phantasmal force is the 2nd level spell. If we would be willing to swap these two for some other spells that are connected more with hallucinations, with illusion, we won't get major image level, unfortunately, but still, this is something that we can do with with quarter CR Pixie, which is pretty decent. You can pair the Pixie with a sprite. Now, sprites don't have spell castings, although they do have some special traits like heart sight. Sorry. So the sprite touches a creature and magically knows the creature's current emotional state. If the target fails the DC 10 charisma saving throw, the sprite also knows the creature's alignment. Celestial fiends and undead automatically fail the saving throw. We could probably spin this a little bit around and just ditch this trait altogether and give it another spell casting, so you would have more options when picking your pranksters or tricksters for your game. We're not going to use reflections because these are basically shadows. Satyrs don't exactly fit this this scheme or this pattern that we envision over here. Maybe Dryads would be suitable. They have a hypnotic pattern once a day, and they also have minor illusion at will. So this is something that could, let's say, could work. This is Mythic Odysseys of Theros, but a very similar thing can be found Oh, this is also Mythic Odysseys. I was thinking about the Oriad. It's very similar, but although it won't fit. It's not so easy accessible at all. So you probably will have to homebrew some creature. I would actually homebrew a Pixie, a bumped Pixie, level CR level 1 or maybe 2. Maybe I would let it have some gifts from an Archfey. I wouldn't stick probably with the official monsters that we have now. Maybe there will come new monsters within the book that I've been talking about a little bit earlier today. Okay, so this is it when it comes to tricks. And the next level of tricks and games are actual games. So these are games that the players actually know that they are taking part of, and they do it willingly. So they may be tricked into playing a game, although they will still know that they are doing it. So the trickster or prankster is not, the adversary over here is not hidden. And first thing that I got is Dance Off with Satyrs. Now, since over here we're no longer having hidden fake creatures, we can have some skill checks and some additional mechanics that would work with these creatures, with these games. So the Dance Off with Satyrs, we already know by the name that we have Satyrs over here, and the names tell a lot about how this will work, I feel. So there are two types of Satyrs available. One is the CR1, the CR half, sorry, basic rules Satyr. He's a medium fake, chaotic neutral. And in his description, you can read that they are hedonistic revelers. They crave the strongest drink, the most fragrant spices, and the most dizzying dances. So I'm basing on this description that these would be good creatures for a dance-off. But I would suggest using, again, Mythic Odysseys of Teros, Satyr Reveler. Why is that? Because how would we establish a dance-off? You can imagine a dance battle even. So one side dances and then the other side dances. We can have these dances in pairs, and we can have, for example, initiative rolls. You have to roll above 10 on your initiative 3 times in a row to keep the rhythm of the music, because there's going to be music playing all around. You may have to roll a performance check to do something special during the dance. And if you look at the Satyr Reveler, he has a performance +7. So this bumps up the difficulty really, really high, because I'm imagining that these would be contested checks. So your performance versus the Satyr's performance. Additionally, there can be things like, for example, acrobatics for some special swirling dances or some special moves. There can be athletic checks for throwing your partner in the air or jumping above something while you are dancing. So you can figure out the different skill checks, and I will use a mixture of competitive checks. So you throw a d20, you roll a d20, and the Satyr also rolls a d20. But I will also allow for some creative use of the skills that your players have. So, for example, if your players want to perform, give them the option to perform a special dance with these swirls, with these jumps, with specific stuff that they come up with, and make them roll accordingly. You can even have a barbarian be a good dancer, because it can be an intimidating dance. If you're familiar with New Zealand's haka dance, I mean, that's very intimidating, and that's also a dance, right? You can have the Brazilian capoeira dance. That's also rather intimidating. So you can have your player roll for intimidation. You can have not only perception, not only acrobatics, athletics, not only, performance, athletics, acrobatics, but you can have also things like intimidation. You probably could have nature. Why not? You could probably have very different things. Maybe a player is clever enough to use his disguise kit to create a costume for himself or themselves before the great dance off. So this gives you a great many options to choose from. At least I feel so. Okay, the next game I've got over here is Truth and Dare. This is not Truth or Dare, this is Truth and Dare. And before we go further, I just wanted to point out, I'm not talking about what rewards you can get for specific games or whatever else, because we've been talking about Fey gifts, Fey bargains, Fey markets in previous episodes, and I feel that if you need to inspire yourself in that niche, you just need to go back to those episodes because we won't waste time on that here. So truth ends there. A truth in dare game would be a game where the Fey side asks you questions about your history, your backstory. This is a good way to use the backstory of your players. Make the fairies, I'm talking about fairies on broad level, I imagine pixies again, make them ask about the backstory of the player, and make them have a dare for it. So make them put an object on the table, and if they fail to recall some or recollect some information, they will lose the object, and with that object they lose the memories connected with that object. So for example, if a player has a token, a souvenir, trinket from the hometown from which the hero comes from, and fails to recall how many siblings they have, they lose the object that is connected with that. And on the other side, your players can ask the pixies about, and this is up to you, but I would let them ask about anything connected with the region in which the Feywild overlaps with the natural or material plane. So you can have all sorts of plot hooks or all sorts of lore drops over here, because your players can ask about literally anything. The pixies are usually immortal, so they remember a lot. And since they remember a lot, they can tell you a lot about the history of the region. They can tell you about what monsters they saw, who they saw. They can tell you about disturbances in the force and other things that they remember, saw, or just feel because of their unnatural connection with nature and with the world. So this specific game is a way in which you can have a nice, good lore drop, and in the same moment you can force your players to work a little bit with their backstories. Alternatively, if you don't want to force your players to use their backstories, your players don't have backstories, or you feel that they're not so important for your players, you can twist the game a little bit around, and you can have one player talk about another player, what he or she thinks happened with that player in this specific moment. And this is more a game of guessing, but it's less stressful for the players, since it's not like every single player remembered their backstory by heart, right? Okay, game of tag with dryads. Now, dryads are very interesting creatures for such games, because dryads have two really cool things. Let me just get back to the list of creatures. If you look at dryads, they have two very interesting things. First thing, tree stride. Once on her turn, the dryad can use 10 feet of her movement to step magically into one living tree within her reach and emerge from a second living tree within 60 feet at the first tree, appearing in an unoccupied space within 5 feet of the second tree. Both trees must be large or bigger. This is the first thing. And the second thing, they have 3 times a day each entangle. And entangle creates a difficult terrain plus restraint. Now, what you can do is you can have a game of tag with dryads, but make it in the forest, make it in the wilderness. This will be a reasonable challenge even for higher level players. Now, one thing, what do I mean by tag in D&D setting? You can have, and during the preparations, let the dryads be playful. That's the first step. Second step, let them suggest that the players could play with them for something. For example, for a safe passage through the forest, or for a shortcut through the forest. We will take you to your destination in one day if you play with us and win. And if the players or the dryads are concerned about hurting each other, make it so that the weapons are magically turned into wood for the duration of the game, or that the magic of the elder tree coats the weapons so that they are non-lethal. Now, technically or mechanically, this would be a battle. So you would roll for initiative, and you could have players jump from places to places and try to get each Dryad down. So it's a modified game of tag, let's say. There should be probably an additional rule about fireballs and stuff. So no hurting the forest. That would be an additional rule that I would most definitely get. Now, we gotta also escape the labyrinth. This is a super fun thing. Now, you probably are familiar with these plant gardens that look like mazes. They're usually present in French gardens and things like that, but they are very often used in fantasy, urban fantasy movies where you have a hedge garden that is in fact a labyrinth at the same moment. And so you have such a thing, but it's very, very small. Imagine a lab rat size labyrinth. The players get an option to play a game. If they manage to get out of the labyrinth alive, they will receive a magical weapon as a reward. If they accept, they get shrunk into the size of mice or whatever else, and they go into the labyrinth, and the Fae can observe them from the top. So you can narrate how the players are really, really small, and there's a huge eye of a pixie or a dryad or something else looking from top and observing them. There's a magnifying glass and things like that. This is a very fun adventure. Fun encounter. So there's a huge comic potential in this encounter, but it can be also frightening because in the labyrinth you can have giant beetles the size of a house. You can have the boss of the labyrinth can be a mouse or a rat or something even more terrifying. There can be a huge spider as the boss of the battle in the labyrinth. So you have an instant dungeon crawl because the players will start getting lost in the labyrinth, and you will need to find a way how to make the labyrinth well, maybe not accessible, but traversable. So you don't want the labyrinth to be an actual labyrinth. You don't want your players to stick 5 sessions inside one miniature labyrinth. That will bore them to death. But you want them to have some fun while looking for a proper way out. Maybe someone has keen mind, for example, defeat, and remembers all the passes, or maybe there's a micro mouse or whatever else that wants to help the players in getting out of the labyrinth if they do something. And as a reward, they can get a magical brush or pin that grows with them, and it's supposed and it looks like a cushion pin, but it's actually a rapier or a short sword or a long sword or something like that. And this is it when it comes to the games. Now, the last thing that I have is trials and tests. And now trials and tests are usually, in my opinion and in my conception, will usually be encounters, battle encounters. There is one over here that has a comedic value, but usually these will be connected with raw overpowering of something. And usually you want to use trials and tests as plot devices, as you want the players to be forced to play in these games because of story reasons. That's a good way to use them, in my opinion. The first is the mirror hall. Let's imagine that the players bump into the Feywild and they are on the Fey court, and they will get some piece of information over that, what they want or gift, if they manage to prove that they are the real them. Maybe there's a paranoid Fae that doesn't trust anyone and wants to prove that everyone is the true them. So what you have is a hall of mirrors, similar as a hall of horrors or house of horror or house of mirrors, and you get the players inside. And this is again commonly used tropes. On the inside, you have different versions of the players' characters. So a barbarian might meet a barbarian, but from a different path. A bard might meet a bard, but from a different college. And it would be great if you would be able to separate your players over here. So each bard has to fight each other bard, but that may not be always possible. You would have to have some conception about how to narrate such a thing so that players know what's happening. They have this should be very eerie, this should be grotesque and horror-esque. So you would have to work a little bit over here for some battle map and some narration, but the premise is that the reflections want to take the place of the player. There is an option that this will happen, and if this would happen, if the reflection would kill the original, you probably could talk with your player if the player wants to swap subclass with the reflection. If he wants to continue, they want to continue playing with the new subclass, with the new reflection that bested the original. Yeah, but this is something that can happen. You can have a trial 1 by 1. You can have all the players enter the house of mirrors, and only if they all prove that they are themselves, they may continue the travels. The next is mine is better, and this is the comedic value game or trial. There are not many games and trials for pure spellcasters, and this is one of them. This is a game in which you get unlimited polymorph, but you can polymorph only into creatures. Each time you polymorph, you have to polymorph into a creature that is a higher CR than you were before. And it works like this: you have two contestants. One is your player, the other one is the fake creature, and the fake creature polymorphs first into something. For example, a chicken. Now your task is to polymorph into something that is stronger than, or is able to best your opponent's form. So you would transform into a fox. Now the opponent would probably transform into a, let's say, tiger. Tiger would transform into some. If you would transform from a fox into maybe a mastiff, maybe a giant ape, and your opponent would transform into a Tyrannosaurus Rex, and he wins because you probably won't be able to transform into something stronger than that. But there are cases, and this is very arbitrary, so keep that in mind, that you could best a Tyrannosaurus Rex with a swarm of insects, for example. So you would have to probably have some specific rules, what is allowed and what is not. But the deal or the idea is that you narratively, the player has to narratively convince you and the audience that what you transformed in is the stronger form. So you would have to prove that the fox is able to kill the chicken or something like that. This is a game that forces the players to use a lot of creativeness. I'm not sure if it's suitable for every table, especially that it can get a little bit boring for the other players, unless you make it a collaborative effort. So you have not the player polymorph, but each player or each side has a proxy. So it's kind of like a Pokemon game where you choose your next creature with which you will fight. The next thing is catch the pixie. Now I use the word pixie over here. You could probably use some other creature, although again, if you look at the list of creatures that we have accessible or available over here, and you would think about a creature that is good in escaping, well, you could have a blink dog because it's fast and it can blink. You could have quickling because it's super fast, 120 feet fast, but it might not be fun. So we're probably gonna stick again with the pixies because we're not gonna have some I don't know, a green hag escape from us during a game. That does not make any sense at all, or a sea fury or a spring galadrin. So we're gonna have to again go with a pixie, and catch the pixie is a simple game. The pixie has something and escapes through a forest. Now many things can happen in the forest. You can have the pixie slightly glowing, for example, so it's visible here and there, but many different things can happen in a forest. You can have acrobatics checks, you can have a bunch of owlbears attack the players, you can have athletics checks for climbing trees, you can have dexterity saving throws from falling on some slippery slope with rocks. You can have some ghost remnants here and there scattered, and wisdom saving throws for do not stop and stare. You can have some traps, some illusionary, hallucinatory terrain, for example, set up here and there. So there's a lot of things that you can have. And this is basically an obstacle course. So your players need to get from point A to point B while following a pixie. And the pixie it would be best if the pixie would taunt them all the way until they catch them. And again, a thing that could be or should be important is no violence, and especially no violence towards the forest. And that's something that I would probably set up as a rule up front. And the last thing that I got over here is the wild hunt, obviously. Well, the wild hunt probably doesn't need much of an introduction. I talked about the wild hunt in the last episode, where I also created one wild hunt lord. If you would like to use this type of game, you can go back one episode, and in the description you will find also a way to download the stat block and lore for the wild hunt lord. Now, the thing with the wild hunt is that usually there are two options to get inside the wild hunt. You either are the prey or you actively seek out the wild hunt for its blessings. And there are only two ways to win the wild hunt. You need to get from point A to point B without getting killed. And the other option is you need to get to a portal somewhere in the forest, or you need to get from point A to point B, but the point B is an object. There's also a third option. You need to outlast the wild hunt through the whole night. That's also an option, and also something that is covered in lore and folklore and mythology around the world. So 3 options. Get from point A to point B. So for example, get out of the forest, run out of the forest. Second option, get to a portal that is inside the forest, in the middle point, for example. And the third option, outlast the night and survive the night and outlast the wild hunt. Now, this is a strictly combat encounter. You should have dozens of dogs, spirits, wild hunt lords, magicians, warlocks, and other creatures hunting for the players. And this is a very high level. Usually, this is a very high level encounter. Although, since we don't have any high level Fey up until now, and no wild hunt specific ones, you can basically tweak this encounter to fit every level. Although, in my opinion, this is something that is so well known that it shouldn't happen at least up until the players are level 10 or 12 or even higher. That would be even better. But that's up to you. You can tweak it, and if it works for you, it works for me. Okay, so the wild hunt, as mentioned, is strictly a combat encounter, and depending on what option of ending the wild hunt you pick, you can have the wild hunt defending the object in the middle, although it's not a hunt much if we do it like that. And you can have the creatures that are responsible for hunting in the other 2 options. My favorite option is actually outlasting or surviving the night, because it gives you a lot of options to flush out your players from any place, because we're talking about spirit hunters, the best spirit hunters that you can have in the world. So they will know where your players are. They can't hide just like that. They need to be on the run. That is why it's called also the wild hunt. Because it's all about your players running and escaping and the threat and the adrenaline, and this is the ultimate game that the Fae can play on you. And this is sadly the penultimate episode of basically Feywild. Well, and actually there will be 2 more episodes. The next episode, which will be the formal final episode of basically Feywild, will be about further readings, inspirations, movies, games, comic books, graphic novels, and other things which you might want to inspire yourself with. I am going to focus on books and supplements that were written for the 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons. And the next episode will be in 2 weeks, not in 1 week, since I got a lot of prep work to do for that. And afterwards, after the official final, I will have one more episode when I'm done reading Wild Beyond the Witchlight, the new Feywild book from Wizards of the Coast, just to see what I'll find inside and how it fits with the basically Feywild lore that I've been presenting in this series up until now. Okay, so I hope you liked this episode. If so, as usually, like, subscribe, thumbs up, and stuff like that. Also, leave me a comment if you want more episodes, or if you have an idea about an episode that I didn't make but I should do. That's also an option. And I'll see you around. Bye.